What's your best sense, sitting where you are, of how this current India-China conflict is likely to end? Do you see a military escalation? Do you see a peaceful resolution? What would it take for the Chinese army to go back? Or do you think a military conflict is inevitable?
I think it is not inevitable. I think that Prime Minister Modi seems aware that it is not, it would not be an ideal situation for this to escalate. And he's actually, even though there's a certain amount of tough talk and rhetoric, I think he's actually trying to lower the temperature rather than raise it. Now, what is going to happen is I think you are going to have more geoeconomic and geostrategic competition between India and China. So, you know, things like the ban on Chinese apps, there are going to be, certainly in technology, two ecosystems in the world, a Chinese ecosystem and a non-Chinese ecosystem. India will clearly be part of the non-Chinese ecosystem. What I think the Indian government should do is to think more imaginatively, more boldly about that and say, what we want, this should be the next great Indian demand from the Biden administration. We want a comprehensive strategic economic relationship that involves energy, that involves technology, and that involves investment. And we would partner together so that we can create supply chains and consortiums that ensure that the world is not overly dependent on any one country, by which, of course, one would mean China. So India could be a key component in the alternative to Huawei, the Chinese 5G provider. India could be a key component in solar, in wind, in hydrogen and fuel cells, so that the Chinese do not dominate that one space. And that could be, you know, the argument could be the world deserves a diversity of supplies and a diversity of choices, and India wants to play its part. I think Washington would react very well to that. I think the Biden administration would react well. It is in line with their own thinking about green energy and such. And so, but India needs to be active. You know, this is going to help India more than it helps the United States. And therefore, it is incumbent on India to have a strategic vision, to articulate it, and then push for it. I think they would find they're pushing on an open door in Washington, but they do need to push.
How do you think the pandemic is likely to change the global economic system? Many commentators are veering around to the view that we could be heading towards a post-capitalist society. Does China's growth present a model to countries in Asia and Africa that you can maintain tight political controls and yet grow your economy at speed?
I think it's going to be more complicated than that. Look, as I devote a chapter on this in the book, the reality is that the first thing everyone is going to look for in this post-pandemic world is growth. Because what has happened? You have had an economic paralysis of a kind we've never seen before. As you know, Indian growth numbers were down more than they have ever been in recorded history. And by the way, across the world, you have massive economic dislocation. So everyone is going to be searching for growth. In that environment, you don't then turn your back on the best engines of growth which have been in markets and trade. And look at Prime Minister Modi. Modi is doing more labor reform than he has ever done before. He's not just labor reform. Many of the hard reforms that were previously seen as politically untouchable, he's taken on because he wants growth, because he wants to jumpstart the economy. This is going to be true in other countries as well. I think that the reality is that we are going to enter into a world where you need both. It's not an either or. You have to have open markets, trade, because you need the growth, you need the dynamism. But what we are seeing between the pandemic, with the global financial crisis, with so many of these shocks, people need a little more security. They need to be able to navigate this world. What I call it in the book is I say, you want to be open and armed.